43 years on the bench will teach you a lot about reading people. I've watched hundreds of witnesses take the stand, studied the way their hands move, the way their eyes dart, trying to separate the liars from the truth tellers. I thought I had that skill mastered. Then, on a freezing Tuesday morning in February, a man who hadn't seen anything for 35 years walked into my courtroom. And by the time he left, he'd rewritten everything I thought I understood about seeing. What he laid out that morning stunned the room. Facts, dates, specifics, all gathered without a single glimpse of the world around him. When I finally asked him the one question everybody in that courtroom was dying to ask, how could you possibly have known? His answer stuck with me in a way few things have in 4 decades of judging. So let me walk you through what happened, because at its heart, this isn't really a story about a courtroom. It's a story about a man who lost his eyesight as a boy, and in exchange, built a kind of awareness that most of us with 20/20 vision will never come close to. It's a story about how a betrayal got uncovered, not through watching, but through listening, smelling, and simply paying attention. Before I get into it, and trust me, you'll want to hear every bit of this, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. And once you're done, tell me in the comments, have you ever picked up on something important without actually seeing it happen? My name is Judge Vonda. I've sat as a municipal court judge here in Providence, Rhode Island since 1982. That's over 4 decades of watching people at their finest and at their most broken. 4 decades of hearing every version of a story imaginable and trying to figure out which parts were real. My mornings start the same way every day. Up at 5:30, black coffee, no sugar, the way my dad always made his. He came over from Italy with barely anything but grit, spent his whole working life in construction, and he's the one who taught me that your eyes aren't the only tool you've got. Listen to how somebody's voice moves when they talk, he used to tell me. Feel what the room is doing. Your eyes get tricked all the time. Your other senses hardly ever do. I nodded along for years without really getting it. Then David Morrison sat down in front of me. I'm always at the courthouse by 8:15. Margaret, my clerk, has worked beside me for 27 years now. She has my files stacked and ready before I even sit down, because she knows I need those quiet first minutes with my coffee before the day starts coming at me. That particular Tuesday, the 21st of February, Margaret's expression told me something was off before she said a word. Judge, she said, today's a tough one, divorce case. The husband's blind, has been since he was a kid, and he's suing for adultery. His wife's fighting it, says there's no way a blind man could actually know what he's claiming. I picked up the file and sat down. Morrison versus Morrison. David, 47, Jennifer, 45. 18 years married, 2 kids, 16 and 14. David wanted the divorce granted on grounds of adultery and was asking for full custody. His filing named their neighbor, Thomas Bradley, claimed the affair had been going on roughly 8 months and included specific dates and time windows. What made it unusual was David, blind since he was 12, after a drunk driver's crash destroyed both his optic nerves. No light, no shapes, nothing. Jennifer's side wasn't denying the affair happened. She was denying that David could have known about it. Her whole defense boiled down to, he's blind, he has no way to prove any of this, he made it up. I went through what David had submitted as evidence. It was thorough, specific, and every last bit of it came from senses that had nothing to do with sight. At 9:30, court was in session. This was a preliminary hearing. The question on the table was whether David's evidence could even be considered, given that he couldn't see any of what he claimed to have witnessed. David sat at the plaintiff's table beside his attorney, Sarah Chin, with a golden retriever settled at his side wearing a service harness. Her name tag read, Justice. Across the room, Jennifer sat with her own attorney, wearing an expression that looked almost like pity mixed with condescension, like she'd already decided her husband's blindness made this whole thing pointless for him. I called the room to order. David had an athletic build, dark hair going gray at the temples, dark glasses, and posture like he was standing at attention, even seated. His face turned toward the sound of my voice, though of course he couldn't see me at all. Jennifer, polished and put together, kept sneaking glances his way. Mr. Morrison, I began, your filing alleges an affair between your wife and your neighbor, Mr. Bradley. Your wife's position is that your blindness makes it impossible for you to have any real evidence of that. What's your response? His attorney started to answer for him, but David gently stopped her. Your Honor, if it's all right, I'd like to speak for myself. I nodded, then caught myself, remembering he couldn't see the gesture. Go ahead, Mr. Morrison. He rose. Justice rose with him, staying tight to his left side out of years of training. He found the edge of the table with one hand to orient himself before he spoke. Your Honor, I was 12 when I lost my sight. A drunk driver ran a light and hit our car. Both optic nerves were destroyed. I haven't seen anything since. His jaw tightened for a second. What people don't always understand is that when you lose your vision young, your remaining senses don't just get a little sharper, they transform. I've spent 35 years training myself to read the world through sound, scent, touch, instinct. I experience things most sighted people never learn to notice. Jennifer's attorney jumped in. Your Honor, this is a lovely sentiment, but heightened senses aren't evidence of. I cut her off. Counselor, let him finish. Continue, Mr. Morrison. My wife assumed that because I can't see, I can't know, he said. But I catch things sighted people miss constantly. I hear the tiny hitch in someone's voice when they're lying. I smell the shift in someone's sweat when they're anxious. I know the exact position of every object in my house because I've memorized it down to the inch. And I know without question that my wife has been involved with our neighbor because I tracked it using every sense I have except sight. Tracked it how exactly? I asked. May I show the court, Your Honor? Go ahead. His attorney passed him a folder and his fingers moved across it, reading the braille tabs he'd labeled himself. I want to start with scent. It's the sense people underestimate most. I've kept a mental catalog of how our home smells for 18 years. My wife's perfume, my own scent, the kids' scent, all of it. 8 months back, I started catching something unfamiliar in the house. Always in our bedroom, always on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, between 2 and 4. What was the scent? Cologne, Armani Code specifically. I went store to store smelling colognes until I matched it. I've never worn cologne in my life, Your Honor. Our sons don't wear it either. No other man comes into that house regularly except delivery drivers who never get past the porch. Jennifer shifted visibly. Her attorney leaned in to whisper something. I found that scent on the sheets, David continued, on my wife's pillow, on towels in the guest bathroom, always tied to those Tuesday and Thursday windows. He pulled a second sheet from the folder. From there, I moved to sound. I know every engine on our street. I know the mail arrives at 11:30. I know when Mrs. Patterson next door gets home. And I know Thomas Bradley's truck, a Ford F-150 with a rattle in the muffler you can't mistake. Go on. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right around 2 o'clock, that truck pulls into our driveway. I'm usually in my study, which faces that direction, so I hear all of it. Engine cuts off. 23 footsteps up the walk. Heavy boots. The door opens without a knock because she's expecting him. I hear them greet each other, and her voice changes the second she talks to him. Softer, breathier. 18 years married, I know every register that woman's voice has. The room had gone completely still. Then I hear them go upstairs. 42 stairs. I count them every time I climb them myself. Bedroom door shuts. Lock clicks. Jennifer's color had drained from her face. I'll spare the court the specifics, Your Honor, but what follows isn't ambiguous. About an hour later, the shower runs in our bathroom. Then footsteps back down, slower, more relaxed than the walk up. A quiet conversation at the front door. His truck starts and leaves. Half an hour after that, the shower runs a second time. My wife washing up again. He kept going. There's also touch and spatial memory, Your Honor. I have something close to echolocation. I can sense objects and shifts in a room through how sound bounces around me. After those visits, things had moved. The passenger seat in our car had been pushed back 6 inches. I'm 5'10", my wife's 5'4". That seat was set for someone taller. I measured it myself. Furniture in our bedroom had shifted slightly. The nightstand pushed pushed back 3 inches. The reading chair turned about 15 degrees. Tiny changes most people would never register, but I register everything. On top of that, her habits changed. She started running the wash more often on those exact evenings. Always the same load, bed sheets. She was covering her tracks. Jennifer's attorney stood again. Your Honor, all of this is speculation dressed up as detail. Counselor, I said, I want to hear the rest. Is there more, Mr. Morrison? There is. I set up a voice-activated recorder in our bedroom. Perfectly legal in Rhode Island under one-party consent since I'm a resident of that home. Over 8 months, I collected 47 recordings of my wife and Mr. Bradley, several of which include them discussing the affair directly. I'd like to play a short clip if the court allows. Real quick, before you hear this clip, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, now's a good time because this next part is the moment the whole case turned. I permitted it. The recording played, a man's voice asking, does he suspect anything? Jennifer's voice answering, no, he's blind. He doesn't know anything. He can't. The man again, you sure? He's sharp. And then Jennifer laughing. He's blind, Tom. He lives in the dark. We could do this in the same room and he'd never know. Jennifer shut her eyes. She knew she'd been caught. I have 46 more like that one, David said. And there's a secondary witness, in a way, my dog. Justice is trained to react to danger or distress. About 6 months ago, she started growling every time Mr. Bradley came near the house, which was completely out of character. Dogs pick up on tension people try to hide. Finally, Your Honor, the money. My wife withdrew about $12,000 in cash over 8 months, always small amounts from ATMs. I pulled the bank records and traced the withdrawal locations, all clustered near upscale stores. I called around, described her, asked about purchases. 3 stores confirmed gifts bought for a man. 1 jeweler confirmed a $2,800 watch. I don't own a watch like that. I couldn't see one if I did. Honestly, if you're sitting there as stunned as I was in that courtroom, if this is making you rethink what witnessing something even means, drop a comment and tell me about a moment you picked up on something without ever seeing it. And hit that like button too, because more people need to hear this one. Subscribe if you haven't already. I promise there's more where this came from. I leaned back, genuinely at a loss. In thousands of divorce cases, I had never encountered anything close to this. A blind man building a case with more precision than most cited witnesses ever manage. Mrs. Morrison, I said, would you like to respond? Jennifer was crying now. Her lawyer murmured something urgent in her ear. Finally, she spoke. I didn't think he'd know. I thought because he couldn't see. You assumed you were invisible to him? I asked. Yes, she whispered. I'm sorry. David's expression never changed. No triumph, no anger, just quiet certainty. Your Honor, Jennifer's attorney said, my client isn't contesting the divorce itself, but we are contesting full custody. A blind man simply cannot manage 2 teenagers on his own. I saw David's jaw tighten again. Mrs. Morrison, I said, your own attorney is arguing that a man who just tracked an 8-month affair using nothing but sound, smell, and memory, who works full-time as a software engineer, and who has raised these children for their entire lives, can't be trusted to parent because he's blind. He needs help, Your Honor. He can't drive them. He can't supervise properly. Let's hear from the children then. Are they here? They were. After a short recess, Emma, 16, and Michael, 14, sat in the witness area. Emma, I said gently, tell me about your father as a parent. He's the best parent I could ask for, she said. He's raised us our whole lives. He knows us better than anyone. Give me an example. He can tell I'm upset before I even say anything. He hears it. He knows when Michael's lying about homework because his voice changes. He says he can smell when we're getting sick before we even feel it. Does his blindness get in the way of any of that? Not even a little, she said. He taught me to ride a bike by running next to me, listening for the wheels. He taught Michael to catch by the sound the ball makes hitting the glove. He helps with homework by having us read out loud and asking questions. He's never missed a parent-teacher conference. He knows my friends, our schedules, better than I do, honestly. And your mother? Her expression hardened. She was gone for 8 months. Not physically, but she checked out on us to be with someone else. Dad never did. Dad's always there. Michael's testimony echoed hers. Dad pays more attention to my life than Mom does lately. He asks. He listens. Mom was somewhere else in her head for months. Now I get why. After hearing them, I made my ruling. The divorce is granted on grounds of adultery. The evidence here isn't in question. Primary custody goes to Mr. Morrison. His children have made their wishes clear, and I see nothing to suggest his blindness limits his ability to raise them. If anything, his other senses make him more attuned to them than most sighted parents I've seen in this courtroom. Mrs. Morrison will pay child support and cover the legal costs of this proceeding. Assuming your husband's blindness meant he'd never notice was not just incorrect. It was a poor judgment of the man you married. Jennifer wept quietly. David sat still, one hand resting on Justice. Afterward, I asked David to stop by my chambers. He came in with Justice and his attorney. Mr. Morrison, I said, in 43 years, I've never seen a case like this. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you build this level of awareness? He smiled faintly. Losing your sight forces you to pay attention to everything else. Most sighted people go through life looking without really seeing. They watch faces, but miss the emotion in a voice. They look at a room, but never feel what's actually happening in it. I've had 35 years to learn how to read the world through sound, scent, air movement, vibration. I know when someone walks into a room before they say a word. I know what my kids are feeling from the way their breathing shifts. Honestly, Your Honor, I think I notice more than most sighted people ever will because I'm not distracted by appearances. I get the real thing. That conversation stayed with me long after he left. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. David kept the house and got primary custody. Jennifer got alternate weekends and was ordered to pay support. 6 months after that, I read a piece in the Providence Journal. David had launched a nonprofit called Beyond Sight, teaching blind kids to develop their other senses the way he had, and running workshops for sighted adults on the same idea. Curiosity got the better of me, and I went to one of those workshops. About 30 people showed up at a community center. David stood at the front with Justice beside him and asked everyone to close their eyes. For the next hour, he told the room, "You're going to live the way I do. No sight, everything else." He had people identify objects by touch, tell drinks apart by smell, recognize each other by footsteps, and read emotion from tone of voice instead of expression. By the end, the whole room seemed to understand perception differently. One woman came up to him afterward in tears. "I've been married 20 years, she told him, and I just realized I've never actually listened to my husband. I look at him, I don't really hear him." David nodded. That's what sight can do to us. It makes us lazy. We lean on our eyes and forget we've got 4 other senses that tell us just as much, if not more. I've replayed the Morrison case in my head more times than I can count over the past year. The way a blind man saw straight through a deception his wife thought was airtight. The way he uncovered a truth she believed was completely hidden. But what stays with me most is what he told me in my chambers, that most of us go through life looking without ever really seeing. He wasn't wrong. Since then, I listen differently in my own courtroom. I pay attention to the shift in someone's voice, not just their words. I notice the tension in a room, the things that never show up on a face. And I've come to believe that David Morrison, without a shred of eyesight, perceives more truth than most people who have never lost theirs. Here's the takeaway from that case, as far as I'm concerned. Sight is only one channel for understanding reality, and it isn't always the most reliable one. Truth lives in sound, in scent, in the atmosphere of a room, in 100 small details our eyes routinely miss. David never saw his wife's affair. He heard it, smelled it, felt the changes it left behind, sensed it in his own dog. He built a case more precise than most sighted people could have managed. And he reminded me that what looks like a limitation can in fact be its own kind of strength. I'll leave you with this. How much are you missing by depending only on your eyes? What's happening in the sounds, the smells, the energy around you that you're too visually distracted to notice? Try it for a second. Close your eyes. Actually listen. What's there that you'd normally miss entirely? David Morrison lives without any visual light at all. And yet, he lives in a world dense with information. Most of us tune out completely. In that world, truth often comes through clearer than anything sight could offer. If this one shifted how you think about perception, about what it actually means to witness the truth, here's what I'd ask of you. Subscribe to the channel because we tell stories like this one regularly, and you won't want to miss the next. Share it with someone who leans too hard on appearances. And drop a comment about a time you understood something important without ever seeing it. I read every one, and I'd love to hear yours. 43 years on this bench have taught me to look for the truth in testimony, in body language, in every clue available to me. David Morrison taught me that the deepest truths often live somewhere sight can't reach, in a voice's tremor, in cologne that doesn't belong, in the sense that something has shifted even when nothing looks different. He didn't let blindness define him as broken. He turned it into a different, sharper way of seeing. Thanks for sticking with this story. Thanks for being open to a different idea of what it means to perceive something. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the truth is there whether or not you can see it. David Morrison proved you don't need eyes to witness everything clearly. You just need to actually pay attention. One more time before you go, subscribe, so the next story like this one lands right in your feed.